I'm thrilled to be joined now by Junior Achievement of New York's 2020 Leadership Award honoree, Dan Schulman, President and CEO of PayPal. Dan, we're so happy to be honoring you with this award and so grateful that you could spend some time with us. Welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here with you, Joe.
Dan, your work and career really tie together so many of the themes that we have been discussing throughout the summit over the last couple of days. And PayPal's mission is about democratizing access to financial services, which leads to improving the financial health of individuals, families, and businesses around the world. But, underpinning all of this is really the idea of creating pathways to economic mobility. So I really want to start out by asking you, what are some ways you think we can ensure that economic mobility is possible for more people and more communities?
Yep. Well, again, Joe, let me just thank you and Junior Achievement and all the students for this honor. I really greatly appreciate it. And it's so nice to be able to spend a little bit of time with everybody. I think that financial health is foundational to not just the health of our economy, but really the health of our democracy. I think, democracy is always about rising above your own self-interest, thinking about the betterment of the whole. My favorite quote about democracy is, it needs to be more than two wolves and one lamb voting on what to have for dinner. But if people struggle every single month to make ends meet, they're financially stressed, they think the system isn't working for them anymore, that threatens the bedrocks of capitalism. It threatens the bedrocks of our democracy, our political system. And so I don't think there's anything that is more important from a foundational level than financial health. And really, that really depends on financial literacy, people understanding what it means to be financially healthy. It is those of us who are in some position of power enabling all communities to have investment in them, to be able to exercise entrepreneurial skills, to be able to develop a healthy environment and community and family that they have. And then finally, as we're moving into the digital economy, we need to use technology in all of its forms to lower the cost of everyday transactions so that managing and moving money is a right for all citizens, not just a privilege for the affluent.
We've seen this year, the issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion really come to the forefront in some very powerful ways. So I want to ask you, how has PayPal embraced these issues as a company and really as a leader in the broader business community?
Well, first of all, I think it's almost ridiculous that we are still, in this day and age, debating about the relative merits of diversity and inclusion. There is one study after another that basically says the more diverse a team is, the more inclusive a team is, the more inclusive a company is, the better they do in serving their customers and the better returns they have for their shareholders. I mean, one of the very first things I did when I came into PayPal is I asked, do we pay equally across gender and across ethnicity? And my lawyers came back to me and said, don't ask that question, because it's very hard to measure. And I said, no, that's absolutely the question I am asking, and I want it answered. And of course, when we did the study, we found out we weren't paying equally. And we found out we had a multi-million-dollar gap between what we were paying between male, female, and between different ethnicities. And they said, well, Dan, now that we found this out, you can close that gap in many years so we don't have a financial hit in any one quarter. And I said to the team, I want to close the gap between pay I want to close it in a week, not in months, not in years. And because why? Because if you want to have the very best team, the most inclusive environment, be able to recruit from the widest pool of applicants possible to get the very best talent, you need to start with respect. You need to start with paying people equally. And then from there, it's about creating an environment around being inclusive, about caring about all people. And, this to me is something that is part and parcel of the values of PayPal. Whether it comes from our withdrawing from North Carolina, because we thought that a bill passed by the House there would allow for the potential discrimination against somebody for sexual orientation or their sexual identity, to the tragic killing of so many Black people and the resulting despair and determination that came from both our employees and from communities around the country in addressing social justice, in addressing things like the racial wealth gap, and our $530 million commitment to fight racial injustice over the long term. Those are things that I think distinguish PayPal and allow us to create an environment that not only attracts the very best people, but tells, the ethos of our company and what we care about.
Well, that certainly is a very, very, very impressive record, and I commend you on that.
Thank you.
You talked about specifically about racial injustice, and I guess I want to ask you, during this past year, when so much of this has unfortunately kind of smacked us right in the face, did you have one aha moment about all of this where it just really hit you about where we are in all of this?
I'm not sure I had one aha moment. When I was growing up, both of my parents were civil rights activists. Some of my earliest memories are my mom pushing me in a baby carriage at civil rights marches. This is in the early 1960s. My dad asked her not to do that because he was afraid I'd be the youngest kid to have their pictures in an FBI file somewhere. I remember my dad having to go down to Pascagoula, Mississippi to confront a plant manager down there who had fired a Black employee who worked for him for drinking at the wrong water fountain. And my mom waiting anxiously by the phone to be sure that my dad had come back from that, had not been beaten up, something bad had not happened to him. And I remember my dad saying to me that it's what we do in the world, not what we say, that matters. And so from a very early part of my life, I've been engaged in all sorts of areas around social justice, around inclusion. And I would say, though, that the outpouring that we saw post George Floyd's death of really desperation and grief and despair, that here we were, the last civil rights movement was in the late 60s, early 60s. And here we were, and things like the racial wealth gap were as wide as ever. And I talked to a number of Black leaders across the United States, my Black colleagues inside of PayPal, and we decided that we weren't just going to be part of the moment, but that we were going to join into a movement that was going to require us to be part of the fight for racial equality and for social justice over the long term. not just now, not just giving millions of dollars to nonprofits who work so hard every single day to help in this area, but to do even more, to basically, as I mentioned before, make a very substantial commitment, over $500 million, to basically try to do our part to address the racial wealth gap, because that's something that PayPal can actually at least make a small difference around in terms of investing in entrepreneurs, investing in communities of color, helping them to grow and develop, investing in community banks. And so I think this is really more of just a continuation, but a real acceleration in that continuation in terms of what I believe in and what I think is so important for our communities and our country to be in enlightened democracy.
Yeah, no, certainly I think the wealth gap is such a critical aspect of ultimately the drive for equality. Want to switch gears a little bit here. Talk about the pandemic. There's been so much conversation about how is this going to alter the way we work as a society. What kind of fundamental changes might we see on this? And so I wanted to just get your take on that. I mean, what do you think is going to be the outcome of the way this affects the world of work going forward?
Yeah. I think the pandemic, first of all, accelerated and exposed a number of trends that have been happening for quite some time. I think it rapidly accelerated the digitization of one industry after another. I mean, here we are in this sort of weird virtual setting, instead of being at, a gala. The entertainment industry has been fundamentally changed. Medicine, telemedicine has been fundamentally changed. Education, the fact that we're doing so much more remote learning. The retail has changed completely. Last year during the holiday season, 30% of all sales were done online. This year, almost 70% of sales were done online. And when I talk to the CEOs of major retailers across the world, they don't think that we're going back to a 30% in, online, 70% in store. They think we have permanently shifted towards more of an online world than an offline world. And I think that blurring of online and offline has been accelerated by 3 to 5 years at a minimum. And I think that's going to continue. And I think post-vaccines, post the pandemic, I don't ever think we go back to the way that it was. Some people are saying that we're going back to a new normal. I think that's not necessarily the right way to characterize it. I think we're going into a new paradigm that's been informed by what's happened during the pandemic. We've seen an exposure of the sharp differences between various communities, between people who are underserved and have suffered disproportionately as a result of the pandemic. We've seen the rise of technology in terms of how it can redefine both financial services and industries across the world. And it's going to fundamentally change the way that we work. There's no question about it. I don't talk to any CEOs that believe 100% of their employees are going back to the office. I think you're going to probably have 20 to 30% of employees who work full-time back in an office, maybe 20% of employees who work completely remotely, and then all the rest, some hybrid form, maybe 2 days at the office, 3 days at home, 3 days at the office, 2 days back at work. But I think we need to fundamentally rethink the way we work. and the way industries across the world will function. And by the way government and higher education will function as well.
Dan, I know we're drawing close to the end of our time here, so what I'd like to do perhaps is just tie this back a little bit to the work we do at Junior Achievement. And you alluded a little bit to this before, but maybe we can have an additional conversation on it. How does a better understanding of financial literacy and entrepreneurship really help young people not only become more empowered about their own future, but really extend to fostering overall economic growth and development on a macro level? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's kind of essential for all of us to be part of the world that we live in. I mean, first of all, understanding financial literacy, how to save, where to invest. If you want to live your dreams in whatever way, shape, or form they may be, having financial health as that bedrock of your life is so crucial. And without financial literacy, there's no way that can happen. It's sort of like step one for that to happen. Then when I think about entrepreneurship, I think the first word that comes to my mind with entrepreneurship, because I've been an entrepreneur many a time, is resilience. Because you need to be organized. You need to have a vision. You need to be organized to have a plan. You're going to execute against that vision. You need to be sure that you've got the right funding behind you, that kind of thing. But no matter how organized you are, what you think is going to happen and what happens are two entirely separate things. And often you will get, I'm a big mixed martial artist. I've been doing this all my life. Anytime you get into a fight, you will get punched. There's no question about it. Anytime you try to do something on your own, anything in life, frequently you get hit hard. It's something that wasn't your fault or could have been your fault. It doesn't really even matter. It's a matter of resilience. How do you get back up on your feet? How do you think under pressure? And I think this idea of entrepreneurship, which most people think about as like starting your own business, I think is really all about life skills and really important life skills. And so I think being able to have financial literacy, being able to have a sense of what it means to be an entrepreneur and how you extend that to all parts of your life in terms of who you are as a person. How authentic are you as a person? How resilient are you as a person? How empathetic, how respectful are you as a person? I think these are the skill sets in life that all of us need to always learn and think about. We never know it all. We should always think of ourselves as not know-it-alls, but learn-it-alls, because I find, especially through martial arts, that the more I know, really the less I know. And the more that forces me to be humble about how much more there is to still understand. And I think having that openness to learning and understanding is going to help all of us in this room to achieve the best we can in our lives.
Well, especially during this pandemic, we've been impressing upon the young people that we work with about the fact that grit, resilience, perseverance is as important, if not more important, than the actual knowledge and skills that you acquire throughout life. So I think that's a great place for us to end our conversation. Dan, I want to thank you again for being with us today, for accepting our award, our leadership award for 2020 at Junior Achievement of New York. And also thank you for your leadership, not only at PayPal, which is a company that we are just absolutely thrilled and proud to be associated with, but really in the larger corporate community in general. You're a visionary and a leader, and we thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for the honor. It means a ton to me and inspires me to keep trying to do the things that we're doing.